Solitary confinement is a tomb. It's living in a tomb, the size of a parking space. Imagine being in this tomb, in this confinement, for 22 to 24 hours. You don't know when it's coming, you don't know when it's ending. My name is Kimberly Jenkins Snodgrass. I'm the Vice Chair of Interfaith Action for Human Rights. I'm also the mother of Kevin D. Snodgrass Jr., who is an inmate at Red Onion State Prison. My son Kevin is my oldest, my firstborn, so he's my gem. He's my diamond in the rough. To lose him to mass incarceration, wrongful incarceration, and solitary confinement is just overwhelming for the family. For the years that Kevin was in solitary confinement, he did a great job of camouflaging the effects solitary confinement was having on him. So basically, we would have those moments where we had personal conversation, and clearly you could see and hear the depression in his voice. But once he was released from solitary confinement, you really saw what solitary confinement did to him. His patience was shorter. He didn't really feel comfortable being around a lot of people. The first time I hugged him, I remember the shiver. I remember the shiver that I could feel in his body, because really that's probably the first time he really had a touch of any kind from a loved one.
My name is Michelle Griffin. I'm from Fredericksburg, Virginia. My husband William is an intelligent individual. We have known each other since we were children. There was a little time in between us coming back into each other's lives, because I spent a lot of time overseas and he has been in Virginia all his life. And I started communicating with him one day based on some information I had received regarding his health, because he had been in solitary confinement for a few years. When I began writing William, I found out that he was very depressed. And it wasn't like the person that I had known all my life. He was a very fun-loving person, a very funny person. And I began communicating with him, and he was telling me about the things that he was experiencing. When I had the opportunity to visit William, I could tell that there was a little bit of hope in his eyes, but not a lot. I could see that any bit of humanity that was in him, you could tell the system did all it could to remove it from him.
I don't think people can really grasp the effect it has on your perception of reality. I could go days without leaving my cell. I could go days without saying a word to another living person. I would talk to my TV more and the characters on TV than I would to another living person. So you begin to lose this connection with reality. When you get up in solitary, there was no sunlight. I didn't see a sunrise my whole time in solitary for that 16 and a half months. I never saw the sunset for 16 and a half months. And it does something to you emotionally, psychologically, that I still am grappling with. We would have shakedowns about once a month or once every other month when I was in solitary. And you would be thrown up against the wall by one of the officers. They would be checking your clothes for contraband, and in the process basically lifting you up by your boxers, by your jumpsuit, which is extremely painful. And there's nobody to complain to, because what would happen if you complained? You would lose more privileges. You already hardly had pretty much everything gone, but you would have this hopeless feeling.
The only means of communication that we have are writing letters, phone calls, and visits. And our visits did not happen right away, because even within the state of Virginia, it's a 6 to 8 hour commute to these prisons that are up in the Appalachian Mountains. deep within Virginia, right on the Kentucky-Tennessee line. If you don't have the means or the income to make these visits, it could be very costly.
Solitary confinement creates isolation for the inmate. In the case of my son, specifically, we are 6 hours away from each other, so our visits are limited. He has 3 sons, and I have to coordinate to get them to him. There's an isolation in solitary confinement that occurs when they're away from the general population. As far as friends and family, there has to be a commitment to want to come up to Red Onion and drive 6 hours, basically a round trip of 12 hours, spend $200 to $300 in a weekend time doing that visit to really keep him in touch with his family. And that commitment has been made, but there's so many who don't have this privilege. There's so many without a voice, and that's why we are advocating. We support the ACLU and the release of this solitary confinement report.
If you understood mentally what that did to a person, who 80% of these people are going to be home in our communities, and you understood the mental state of this person after coming out of Virginia Department of Corrections, that they are now probably paranoid, they're going to have anxiety, they're going to have stress, they're going to have anger. Would you rather have somebody in your community that's been healed and reformed, that has had the opportunity to be educated, to have real effective counseling, not somebody just saying, hey, you're here in the cell, I'm your counselor, and that's it? Would you rather have somebody that's really been rehabilitated, or somebody that's thrown into your community who you thought the state had rehabilitated, and you're trusting them to make sure your community is safe, but they haven't been rehabilitated? Solitary confinement is like a road towards death. It will rip your heart out. It tears families apart. It strips away a lot from the individual that has to sit in those cells all day long. A lot of times they don't even know what to feel. When somebody tells you their days are running together and they don't know if it's Monday or Tuesday, that's sad. That really hurts. It's very inhumane. It's a war tactic. And who would want to put an individual in that state of mind if you're saying they're there to be corrected?
Solitary confinement is inhumane, dehumanizing, and it needs to stop. Solitary confinement is the worst form of punishment that you could give an individual who has an opportunity to possibly return to society as a productive citizen. To the lawmakers and legislators, this is what I want to say to you guys. Virginia, you have to wake up. You are far behind in releasing the wrongfully incarcerated. You are far behind in publicly dealing with justice reform. You can no longer come into our communities, the African American communities, and take pictures with us for elections. You can no longer come into our communities and say justice reform for election, and then you get into office and don't do anything. Those days are over.